After having successfully reached the pinnacle of French victory by the capture of Moscow and then its own destruction, Napoleon Bonaparte was forced to evacuate the city and begin the long retreat back to safe French territory. However, as the French army retreated across the Russian frontier, they found themselves coming under attack from Cossacks and peasants alike. No matter where the French went, they were always being pestered by the Russian people. As such, in the span of 3 weeks, Napoleon's army would lose 60,000 men who could not be replaced right away. To further complicate matters, there was even an attempted coup in Paris by one of his generals, but it was narrowly defeated. Hardened by the French defeat in Russia, the European allies once again communicated with each other and formed an alliance to wage war against Napoleon. Throughout the winter and early spring of 1813, Napoleon would consolidate his forces and successfully defeated the Allies at the Battle of Dresden. But this initial victory would prove to only be the opening salvo, as the Allies would continue to build up their army to such a large force that they were able to successfully defeat Napoleon at the Battle of Leipzig. With their victory assured, the Allies offered peace terms to the French Emperor. And the terms were rather surprisingly generous, but did have its consequences. To begin, Napoleon would be allowed to remain Emperor of France, but France would have its borders pushed back away from Central Europe and up to the Rhineland. The hope was that by having a strong France in the west, it would act as a counter-check to a strong Russia in the east, and Central Europe, with its multitude of small German states, would just be that buffer zone between east and west. Now, Napoleon was warned that these would probably be the best terms he would ever receive from the Allies, and that if it was a good idea, he should take it immediately. However, Napoleon decided to stall. He was of the opinion that he could still win the war, but as he began to see just how many men the Allies were mustering and how few men he had, he realized there was very little chance of him succeeding in winning the war. When trying to renegotiate peace, the Allies said, "No, we will not renegotiate based off of the previous terms. Instead, here are our new terms. You may still be Emperor of France, but now your borders will be sent back to how they looked in the year 1791. Nearly 25 years' worth of gains for the French people had been erased through a stroke of the pen. Napoleon, naturally, refused this particular offer. But perhaps most damaging was the fact that while the Continental Allies were willing to allow Napoleon to stay as emperor, it was the British who said no. If we're going to have peace with France, it will come without Napoleon Bonaparte in a seat of power. As a result of this firm negotiation tactic, the Continental Allies agreed. And so now Napoleon was in a fight for his life to save not only his role as emperor, but also his empire. By the end of 1813, Napoleon would pull his army back to within the borders of France itself. And in 1814, Allied forces would invade, marching in a two-pronged attack from the north and the east, and then also with the British moving in through the Pyrenees in the south. On March 30th, 1814, the French would attempt to hold back an Allied army 5 times its size, and the city of Paris would fall on the 31st of March, 1814. Over the next few days, many events would occur, and each one had its own consequences. On April the 1st, Talleyrand was named head of a provisional government, ever the political survivor. On April the 2nd, the French Senate would depose Napoleon, and on the 3rd, pass the Emperor's Demise Act. Now, Napoleon, by the 3rd of April, wanted to launch a campaign to retake Paris and effectively begin driving the Allies back out of France. However, as he proposed his plans for battle, his soldiers and regional commanders were willing to fight for him, but his generals were not. And where he had no generals, it was safe to say he had no army. On April the 4th, Napoleon offered to abdicate in favor of his infant son, with his wife acting as regent. But the Allies refused, fearing that with the infant child acting as the new heir apparent to the throne, Napoleon would find some way to assert his authority once more. Replying to the negative, Napoleon, on April the 6th, would abdicate without any condition. When he left his army, he told his men that he planned to write the history of France, highlighting their victories and the triumphs they had. And yet, the Allies weren't sure if they wanted to have this particular exploit being brought out, as it could rally the French to bring Napoleon back and even, perhaps, start another war. As part of the terms for the French surrender, Napoleon would be exiled off the coast of Tuscany on the island of Elba. He was given full sovereignty over the island and was even allowed to be called emperor there. And from May the 30th, 1814 to February the 25th, 1815, he ruled over the island, overseeing every aspect of it and improving life there. And during the exile, he would learn of the death of his first wife, Josephine. Now, it was upon her passing that most likely Napoleon began to develop the scheme to make an escape from the island. He had developed a small navy and even had an army of about 700 men. And while many thought Napoleon was defeated, the emperor knew he had one more campaign in him to change his fortunes and restore his glory.
For more information, please consider these suggested titles. Be sure to click on the left-hand side of the screen to subscribe to our show, and on the right-hand side for our latest episode. And we will see you again for the next episode of Milling Through History.